You're listening to Sea to Sky podcast, For Sisters by Sisters with Marina Thompson and Dana Moreland. Brought to you by Sea to Sky alumni chapter of Alpha Omicron Pi. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Sea to Sky podcast. Dana and I are joined here in our virtual studio by an AOII legend who recently celebrated her 50th AOII anniversary. She initiated AOII in Alpha Gamma in 1975 at Washington State University. Please welcome Suzanne Colgan.
Hi. I'm hardly a legend, but thank you all the same.
We think you're a legend, Suzanne.
Thank you.
100%. Suzanne, can you let us know a little bit more about your AOII experience? When did you get involved after graduation? Why?
Well, I got immediately involved. And to answer that question, I actually need to go back or would want to go back to the very beginning when I pledged Alpha Gamma at Washington State University. So as a freshman, a traveling consultant, as we called them then, came for a visit. Her name was Candy Sue Pearson. I can still see her now, standing in the living room of the AOII house and singing, "Hey, Daddy, I want to be an AOII." And I think that was kind of part of her wrap up, but I was just enthralled. And then the subsequent year, Jane Hamblin came to visit. I think I was maybe the Panhellenic delegate. My big sister was the chapter president. And I have this memory of us after hours sitting in the kitchen. And I just felt very special that I was hanging out with the chapter president and the traveling consultant. And then the third TC that came to visit was Chris Mosier, and we all just loved her. And so the whole experience of that was just so formative and foundational, because it really confirmed what we say, that AOPIs everywhere are your sisters. And, here we go with these people from, I can't remember where Candy Sue was from, but Jane Hamble was from our Purdue chapter, and Chris Mosier was from Missouri. And even though they're spread out, we still share the values of it. And so I just knew immediately that I wanted to apply to be a traveling consultant, and feel quite fortunate that the experiences that I had as a chapter officer. I was also the Panhellenic president at WSU. And I think that those things just all wrapped up into putting me in a good position to be a traveling consultant. And I was quite honored. And this was back in the day when there were only 4 of us covering the country. So I was fortunate to be hired. So straight out of graduation, I was off to training at Vanderbilt and then hit the road.
That's a really moving story.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I joined with Ginger Banks, and I think Jane as well traveled 2 years, and so was able to see even more of the country as a result of that, and also had the opportunity to work in the headquarters. And I was thinking about that today, that, gosh, I'm not even sure there were a dozen staff members. I'm thinking more 7 or 8 people. And to fast forward to now, and what the staff is, it's just really remarkable. And I'm recalling that we were just in the beginning of what we called the professionalization of headquarters. And I think Ginger talked about that during the recording, and that recalled it to mind. So that was in the 75 convention. And so implemented, I guess, in 77, and I came along in 78. So we were all still, I guess, finding our way to that. And I feel very cheeky about it, because after traveling for the 2 years, I then took on a position that at the time was called the Chapter Services Coordinator. And I was in charge of the consultant program for both our special consultants and the traveling consultants and the like. And, and so when you think about now, when it was just this, maybe, I don't know, 7 or 8 of us doing all the work of it. And Dana, I think you might remember back when we had, it was called the CCOM, the Collegiate Chapter Operations Manual, and the COM, these big old thick notebooks that go through and essentially what is Alpha Link and fulfilling the promise. So it was all very exciting and rewarding that this little band of us was helping to run the fraternity.
Something that so moved me as you were talking, Suzanne, is I loved that you were able to identify the traveling consultants that visited your chapter each year you were a collegian. The women in those roles do have such an opportunity to impact our lifetime. That was so impressive. I was the chartering president for my chapter, and we had a resident consultant with us. It was Lisa Neathenthal. And I still continue to be in awe of Lisa, just like I was when I was a collegian.
Yeah.
They have such an impact and have the opportunity to represent the fraternity so well. You've had such incredible experiences, starting both as a collegiate member and then as a volunteer and then a staff member. Of all the roles that you've had within AOPI, what is your most favorite?
I really have to say it was the traveling consultant position. I have said frequently over the years that I think I packed in a lifetime of experience in the 2 years that I traveled. The first year I traveled was more Midwest. It also took me into Canada. I visited our chapter at University of Toronto. And then the second year, it was a number of the southern states and out in California and the like. And the position of a traveling consultant just shows you that we are definitely not one size fits all, that our chapters are a wonderful tapestry of the sisterhood. My experience was in a housing situation. So I lived in a sorority house, but most of our chapters aren't housed, and it still works. So that was always really kind of magical to see how the women in the various colleges and the universities create and develop their sisterhood.
Absolutely. Yeah. Currently, you're serving as chapter advisor to our Beta Kappa chapter at the University of British Columbia, and you live in the United States. I think our listeners would be intrigued to learn what it's like advising a chapter across a border, an international border.
You know, that's a great question. And let me back up just a little bit. I think I mentioned earlier that while I jumped into AOPI straight away after graduation, traveling consultant positions and was active, worked in the headquarters and such, then life and work intervened. And I call it my period out in the wilderness, a little interregnum between being an official volunteer and now. And it was actually during COVID where I even got to my limit. And I am very much an introvert. I'm okay by myself and on my own. And so I used to joke with my AOPI gang that when we Zoomed that, I was kind of built for quarantine. It's okay. I don't need to be running around. So I was fine. But even I got to a limit. I looked around and went, wow, this really is isolating. And I saw a posting on Facebook that was seeking advisors. And it was following the closing of our chapter at the University of Washington, which is, would have been great, would have been 20 minutes away. And I went on the Google machine and I looked at the chapters in Washington State, and supporting those chapters would mean going over the mountain pass. And the border is about a 2-hour drive from where I live. I'm in a suburb north of Seattle, Shoreline, Washington. And so I thought, well, that's easy enough. It's a straight shot up I-5, 2 hours to the border, however long it takes to cross the border, and then maybe 45 minutes to get to UBC. So I thought, that's doable. So I raised my hand. I said, I'm here. Is that okay? And of course, I was recently reminded that, well, for those 2 years we were in, everyone was Zooming in. And I have to say, I was, in spite of the kind of AOPI and Panhellenic background I had, I was still very nervous because it had been a while since I had been poking around in the sorority system. So I was kind of nervous, but there was a advisor position for membership integrity. And I didn't even know what that was because I had not been involved during all the name changes. And so when I was in school, that was standards, and then it was chapter relations. And by profession, my background is human resources. I've been about 30-something years in and around the human resources field. So I thought that membership integrity would be a good fit. And in fact, maybe the fact that I was a remote advisor, even enhancing it a bit, because I can't be accused of playing favorites. I'm not around anybody. It really was, I think, a bit of a benefit on that. And I was feeling a little timid about learning the new technology. Well, yes, the new technology, that's true too, but the new structure and the new position titles and the like. And so I did that for 3 years and then put my hand up for the chapter advisor position. And about the cross border, what's interesting about that is that I quickly learned that even though my experience was 50 years prior to what the women were experiencing now, it's really quite the same. Because 19, 20, 21-year-olds in college, there are really very similar experiences. Now, certainly the lingo is different. I remember zooming in and someone said that somebody ate. Ate? What does that mean? And they, of course, all laughed at me. And I'm fine. You can laugh at me. That's great. I think one of the things that I learned when I first traveled to Toronto, and I mentioned I did that as a consultant, but in the course of my professional life, I was also transferred to Toronto and worked there. And one of the things that I think Americans may make the mistake that Canada, primarily English speaking country, we share a border. How hard can it be? But it really is a little naive to miss the fact that it is a different culture.
It is.
And so that's the kind of thing that I always want to try to keep in check. There's a way that Americans are. I think, Marina, you maybe could co-sign on that. I think I bring a lot of enthusiasm when I work and get engaged, and I try to keep that in check so that it's appropriate. One of the first things I did was put the Canadian Broadcasting, I guess the CBC maybe, their app on my phone so I could dip into Canadian news and have a little bit of a sense and understanding of what is going on in Canada that may have an impact on our students up there. It's really fun to be able to have a shared experience across the border and at the same time then also learn the kind of differences that you're talking about. Gosh, the Galentine Zoom we had, and talking about the little treats that are available in the United States, but they aren't available in Canada. And the treats that are in Canada that I've never heard of. And these are just little things on the margin. But to me, I've often said this to chapter members that I think some of the most valuable AOPI experiences or experiences you have with sisterhood are the in-between moments, the things that just happen organically. Like I'm just mentioning right now, out of that whole Zoom, what I went to was the fact that we were giggling over the treats. True Fruit, is that what it's called? The chocolate covered strawberries?
Chocolate covered strawberries that I still haven't tried. And you just reminded me I'm going to Costco this weekend.
Man, so good. But anyway, I think that what I have found most interesting is that the Canadian AOPI experience, while very similar, there are also differences. And I feel strongly about there's a wonderful phrase I learned at some workshop a long time ago. What you pay attention to determines what you miss. And yeah, and so when an organization that is so US centric has chapters in another country, even though we seem very similar, there are differences, we should account for. And that's been very illuminating as I'm transitioning into the chapter advisor position, some things that I wasn't aware of that confront the Canadian chapters. Shipping costs across the border, duties across the border that add to the expense of being a member, that I think we ought to be aware of and think, okay, how do we acknowledge that so that they're not deterrents to a full experience?
That's great insight.
Well, it's something that, like I said, what you pay attention to determines what you miss. And unless you're looking north, you're going to miss that. So I feel like I'm in a fairly unique position to be tuned into it because I'm working with a Canadian chapter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess we also have like a big difference between an American university and a Canadian university in the sorority context is that universities don't actually recognize sororities and fraternities as their own entity. Many campuses have to do a shared, like a club for frats and sororities, and then everything's booked through there. And it's just an added layer of complexity to the whole thing. And a lot of people have stigma against sororities and fraternities in Canada that I don't think is the same in the States. And I'm not saying that there isn't any in the States, but I think it's a different lens.
Yes, and
Sure.
I think that the popularity of fraternity and sorority membership is really a wave over the decades. You know, a lot of during the 60s, right? A lot of the NPC groups lost chapters because it just of all the turmoil that was going on campuses, and then it comes back, and then there's the bad press around primarily fraternity hazing incidents, and
Mm-hmm.
I hold my breath every fall, just waiting for the first report of a fraternity member who was seriously injured or lost their life due to a hazing incident. And I will say that I don't think I've mentioned it before, but at some point in my journey after graduate school, I was the advisor to sororities at the University of Georgia. And at that time, I think Georgia had something like 20 of the 26 NPC groups on campus. Large, stately homes, the kind of stereotypical vision that many people have when you think about sororities and fraternity life. And it was extremely popular. I think we had something, fuzzy memory, but something on the order of 3,000 women going through rush. And during the week of, well, we call it recruitment now, right? I operated the second largest bus system in the state of Georgia, getting the rushies from the residence halls up to Greek Road to rotate them through to the various parties. And while there, fraternity advisor got a tip off that a fraternity was going to be hazing their pledges. And so my fraternity counterpart said, "Hey, you want to come with?" So we walked over to this fraternity house, and those silly boys, well, they blacked out the windows at the back of the chapter house, but did not lock their front door. And so, knock, knock, walked in. And everything went silent, of course, as soon as they noticed the fraternity and sorority advisor standing in there and looking straight into their living room. They had a loft overhead, and the members were lined up at the loft, and the pledges were cowering all together. The members were throwing all manner of junk on them. Ketchup and mustard and honey and just all. Room goes silent, and the young pledges are covered in stuff, and they don't know what's going on. And now this was in the early 80s, but I still can hear these young men, what's going on, and one guy saying, "I don't know, just shut up, just do what they say, just do what they say." It was this really horrible thing. And then, of course, my counterpart just said, tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in our office. The National closed that group. They were off campus for at least 4 or 5 years. Presumably they came back. And that's the kind of stuff, of course, gives fraternities and sororities a bad name. And we don't often hear enough about the reality that, at least in the United States, members of fraternities and sororities give more money back to their universities. They're the largest group that go back and celebrate homecoming and things like this. And also the networking available to members of fraternities and sororities, take advantage of it. It's a way to get into business. It's a way to gain business. There are a lot of benefits. And then again, from a cross-border standpoint, the very thing that you're saying is that the challenges to same-sex organizations add another layer of difficulty, and I think deserve some research into what can NPC do to help bolster sorority membership on campuses in Canada. Dana, back to your question about what's it like to advise across the border. So I have this broad American-based sorority experience, both within AOPI and then from the Panhellenic point of view. So I've seen a lot of different systems. And then going into Canada, thinking that there are similarities, and yes, there are, but then the thing, when you discover as an American that the recognition across the country in Canada is not there. There are certainly spots in the United States where universities don't want to have anything to do with their Greek system, and they're considered off campus, and they have an advisor that's handled with the alum group as opposed to having a connection with the university, which is in fact similar to the experience for the Canadians. But to me, I would hope that the Americans would better understand that and then perhaps think creatively about what can be done to bolster membership. I think, I can't remember if it was this immediate past Leadership Academy or the one before that, where the leaders were giving statistics and talking about where college enrollment is going. And if my memory serves, college university enrollment was decreasing in the United States, but it was increasing in Canada. But the increase was with international students versus Canadians, which has implications for the growth and development of the systems up there, and what resources are available to leverage to take advantage and pay attention to those statistics. And I think without the kind of structure that many of our campuses have through the what we now call FSAs, right, fraternity sorority advisors, there are opportunities that I think we're missing.
Well, and taking it to the Panhellenic level, of course, not every one of the NPC groups has chapters in Canada. My understanding is that some of our NPC sister organizations have actively chosen that. It's not that they haven't been selected to come to a campus, or the potential challenges are just not something that they're wanting to embrace. And yet, as you say, I mean, our student population in the United States is changing very much, very quickly. And are we, as NPC organizations, going to be looking at, going to Canada? Are there other countries where we could go and be successful? Should we go to community colleges? I think that those are all questions. I know NPC has looked at the community college question, but it really is so much in common between the US and Canada. At the same time, there are a lot of differences. And I love that you are bridging both cultures in your current role.
Well, you know, I have actually done some research on this. You may or may not recall that it was in 1930 that AOPI expanded into Canada with the establishment of our chapter at the University of Toronto. But I found it very interesting that the first NPC group to expand into Canada was in, get this, 1887. It was with the establishment of Kappa Alpha Theta in Toronto. 1887. And over the course of the time since 1887, 14 member groups, 14 members, NPC groups have once had chartered chapters in Canada. So, and I also found this fascinating. AOPI is among the leaders with chapters. Alpha Phi has 8 chapters in Canada. AOPI has 7.
Wow.
I know. And see, here's this other thing, going back to what you pay attention to determines what you miss. Who'd have figured? You know, I think through a different lens, you go, oh, well, there are only 7 AOPI chapters in Canada versus the however many we have in the United States, right? So yes, that's a minority. But when you put it in context, and from an NPC point of view, we're really a leader in having chapters in Canada. So I would encourage creative thinking around solutions, as opposed to, I don't doubt at all that some of the NPC groups have decided, no, it's probably not worth it. And particularly if you don't have the long history, you know, particularly in these days, the alum support to establish a chapter. You said you were a founding member, so you probably noticed the alum presence when AOPI was brought to your campus and went,
oh Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. It just is so much better for the chapter to have established alumni presence. They don't necessarily have to have an alumni chapter already. I mean, that would be lovely, but it's just to the benefit of the collegiate chapter to have a depth of alumni locally.
And I would, so my response to that is to go back to my collegiate experience, because
Mm-hmm.
Washington State University, Pullman, Washington, land grant, Eastern Washington, through the 4 years of my college experience, there were maybe 3 alums. One was the corporation board, one was chapter advisor, and I don't know what the, my point being is that I feel blessed. I have a complement of 8 women, and we just had a CCAB meeting last night. And I was blown away. 2 of us are traveling consultants for AOPI. One is a management consultant. One is, I don't exactly know her exact title, but she has 20 something years experience explaining to non-finance people about budgeting and planning.
Mm-hmm.
Another person by profession runs their social media, their public relations campaigns. We have a teacher, someone else, a project manager. So it was just so amazing, the skill that we have and the enthusiasm to collaborate and build on that to help provide support and direction for the chapter. So I really feel very blessed, only to the point where it's not impossible, but you certainly need to have someone, like we say, with the ability to be with it over the years so that you can provide the continuity in terms of the growth and the development of the chapter.
Well, I think you can give yourself a pat on the shoulder because you worked really hard to recruit that group of really inspiring women. And
Thank you very
you
much,
took your
April.
time, and it seems like it's paid off.
I hope so. I really am grateful to them, and I try to take care of the care and feeding, but also viewing them, in my mind, appropriately as a bit of a brain trust. I don't know what I don't know. It seems to be a good complement of people willing to offer their expertise. And there are a couple like myself who haven't been involved for a while or ever since graduating, and it just happened to intersect with an opportunity and their willingness to put their hand up and give it a go. And so I really want to be committed to creating an experience for them that meets their expectations, and they will continue. It's like we talk about with our collegians to stay engaged. And another one of my favorite sayings is people support what they help to create. And so really being mindful to turn it over to say, okay, what do you think? What are your thoughts? And working with that so that people have a skin in the game, as the phrase goes, and want to protect it.
I can second that thought.
That's certainly the philosophy of successful alumni chapters, having people be invested, helping them continually creating and recreating the culture and the focus. Yep. That's the way for alumni chapters to be successful.
Yeah,
like sea to sky.
Yeah, well, I think it's important to, well, I was thinking about this the other day. You know how on airlines, a number of times they'll say, we recognize that you have your choice among airlines and appreciate you for selecting, our, and that's the way that I was thinking about the advisors, that they have a choice of what they do with their after work time. And right now they're choosing AOPI.
That's a great commitment to have and a very admirable one. You're right. We have 1 million other things we could spend our time on, but the question why AOPI and why now is a really good one, and the answer needs to be a strong one. And it sounds like you're working very hard to provide that community and that sense of belonging and common goal to these women who are coming back to AOPI after some time. And you talked a little bit about, or quite a bit about, your experience and what you gained from being a traveling consultant. And I just want to ask you, what has AOPI Sisterhood given you that you don't think you would have found anywhere else?
My reflex answer to that sounds too packaged, but it's absolutely true. And that is the lifetime friends that I have. I mentioned earlier that by personality, I'm more of an introvert. And it's just really ironic that I got put on the path to sorority membership. I don't see myself as really a big joiner. I'm not much of an initiator, and I'm quite content spending time with myself. And when I had this job, this human resources profession, which I think to do it well, you really can't have close friendships at the office lest you risk being criticized for playing favorites. Well, I saw you out with wherever. So I didn't hang out with people from work, very rarely. It would only be during an official work thing. So anyway, I have lived and worked in every time zone in the United States, the contiguous United States, plus my time in Canada. And so I moved quite a bit. I was away from Washington State for 40 years. I left the Seattle area in 1974 when I graduated from high school and went east to Washington State and then just kept going across the country and then kind of worked my way back. And so I was gone from here for 40 years. But my goodness, my little crew of Alpha Gamma alums worked me right back in. Still call me by the nickname I had in college, which was just Colgan. We had multiple Sues or Susans and Suzannes in the chapter, so we were big on last names. And so I actually get a kick of that. They still call me Colgan. Hey, Colgan. In kind of a way, it's our own little alum chapter. There are about a dozen or so. A couple will come up from Vancouver, Washington and join us. We have an annual Christmas party. We call it the Omni Pie Party. And that really has been a home base. AOPI has been a home base. And as I mentioned previously, with COVID, that's where I went to when I looked around and said, wow, this really is isolating. And AOPI was my home base.
Wonderful and very well put. And around Sea to Sky's strikeout arthritis event and marrying a person who is really into sports, I know what home base means now.
Oh, that's right. One of my colleagues came over from Poland with her husband, and we went to a Washington National baseball game. And the most fun I had at a baseball game was explaining baseball to these two people from Poland. It was so much fun. And then, so you're right, that was very parochial of me to use that touch point. It was the previous CCAB meeting we're talking about, and I used a reference. I said, Casey Kasem reaching for the stars. And got off the call and went, I don't think any of these women know who Casey Kasem was. And Marina, I'm not guessing that you do. And Dana, I don't know how much younger you are than me. You may or may not know who Casey Kasem was.
I remember Casey Kasem.
Yeah. So Casey Kasem, Marina, was extremely popular, kind of the Ryan Seacrest of his day with the American Top 40. And so every week he would play the top 40 records. They were still called records at the time. His sign-off catchphrase was, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for the stars. And that came up when we were talking about the growth and development of the chapter, that you need to be grounded in the reality of what you need to get through, but being aspirational, do that, but also, reach for the stars. But I just kind of had to laugh at myself, not so much cross-border, maybe a little cross-border, because I don't know if American Top 40 got into Canada, but it was really a generational thing as well. And I kind of chuckled to myself, oh my goodness, I'm going to have to update my references. And I remember when I traveled, I purposely would watch the soap operas so that when I was hanging around with the collegians and watching the soap operas, we could bond over what was happening on General Hospital or All My Children. So it, again, I mentioned before, those little things in between that can be such strong glues that help launch you into a positive exchange, positive relationship. Mm-hmm. I have said to multiple audiences, the single greatest decision I ever made was when I was 18 years old and joined AOPI. I just marvel at that, 50 years ago. I made a good decision. I've made others since then, but that was really, really foundational. I'm very appreciative of AOPI for the opportunities that I've been afforded through my association with it. And I didn't even talk about my graduate degree. I was asked to be a resident consultant at the University of Oregon. And so I was supported in getting my master's because of AOPI.
Fantastic.
I think I've asked you this before, but being a resident consultant at that campus, do you have insight into what their sub-motto means among the emeralds? Because
Yeah,
that's fascinating to me.
Yeah, you did ask me that, and I don't.
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know who we could ask at this point. I mean, the chapter's been gone for quite a while, and certainly the ones who selected that sub-motto are no longer with us. But I'm so intrigued.
Weren't they established in the 30s?
Good question. Not positive.
Again, I was doing a little bit of research and I was trying to get a beat on the Canadian chapters, and Beta Tau obviously came first. And then I think it was just a year later, Beta Kappa was established. And a couple of years after that, we were back down into Washington State and established Alpha Gamma at Washington State. And I kind of have this vague memory about the Oregon chapters. It's a shame that that's lost to history.
Mm-hmm.
Gosh, you know what? You might want to I don't know. You might want to put that out on the Facebook. Maybe there's somebody out here who knows.
I'll ask our T&J too. Suzanne, turning from AOPI experiences to the broader perspective of life, how do you define success?
Oh, wow. My first reflexive response to that is not original, and I don't know where I heard it, but essentially free from want. So that's kind of foundational. And then it would be financial security, health security, friendship security, work security, all of those kinds of things. It's a little bit like the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, satisfying food, shelter, kind of things efficiently. If you have to worry about where your next meal's coming from, it's not going to feel very successful.
Sure.
But you also don't need to have more than you can consume. I don't mean to say just enough, but kind of just enough. And oh my goodness, I'm flashing back to my high school yearbook. I had my 50th high school reunion not long ago, and I pulled out the yearbook, and you have the opportunity to write down your list of activities and all that kind of stuff. And I don't know if I thought I was being a little extra or whatever, but I just said just enough.
Well, I love that. I think that right now we live in a world where we try to get more money, more friends, more likes, more members, more.
Yeah.
And we don't keep any space to enjoy the things we do have. It's always like, I want to reach this goal. And then when you get there, it's like, I have a new goal. And then I have a new goal. And no one pauses to think, wait, I'm actually very happy where I am.
Well, exactly. And if you're always chasing, then can you really say you're successful?
Exactly.
I guess that's kind of what I'm thinking. And feeling safe is pretty successful.
Oh, yes. And fortunate. I think that sometimes that's something that we can take for granted.
Oh, 100%. Yeah.
I don't know how you guys feel about this, but I think that we can wrap it up at this point. Just enough is enough.
Yeah. I think that's a perfect way to end it.
And really spend some time reflecting on the things we do have and the things that we've achieved, and just make space for that. In my case, also spend some time with my dog, who is currently eating my sweater.
Yeah. Well, I have to congratulate my dog Dublin, who did not get off the couch. Now, we did have a nice walk earlier, but I was very nervous about it because she usually wants to go out right after dinner, and I fed her at 5 and she's still sacked out on the couch. I have to give her high praise because she's usually quite jealous of the time I spend talking on the screen.
Thank you, Dublin. Connor had a moment of rest, but now she's up. Thank you both for your time today. It was
Sure.
fantastic. I thought our conversation was very insightful into the way you think, Suzanne, and your experience is so unique.
Suzanne, it has been such a pleasure.
Well, thank you for doing this. As I say, I've listened to the podcast and I really compliment on this and think we need to make it go wider.
Thanks for listening to Sea to Sky podcast. For Sisters by Sisters with Marina Thompson and Dana Moreland. Brought to you by Sea to Sky Alumna Chapter of Alpha Omicron Pi. Till next time.